So that's going to be, turn the page, and we're going to do number 33. So this came up before, but let me show you the source where the Torah compares the day that the Torah was given to a wedding day. So we have that on page 51. It's based on a pasuk of Shir Shirim. It's all about Chas and Kala, wedding, marriage, and the love between them. But here is the pasuk. So if you look on page 51, then it's underlined in the English, and it's pasuk Yud Aleph 11. So you look in underlined in the Hebrew. Look in the English, you can see the translation, but in the Hebrew, we'll read the Hebrew word Tzena or Re'ena, B'nai Tzion, that the daughters of Tzion go out and see, Melech Shleima, the king Shleima, Torah Sha'atra Le'imeh, the crown that his mother crowned him, V'yem Chasanaseh, on the day of his wedding, V'yem Simchas Liba, on the day of the joy of his heart. If you look down at the bottom, it's at the bottom, the English translation of that part. It's the last 3 paragraphs in the bottom. Yom Chasanaseh means on the day his law was given and he became one with Israel, which is his wedding day. Which day is that? The day the Torah was given. And what does it mean when his heart was gladdened? That means the day, the dedication of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. So basically, we find this in many places that the giving of the Torah is compared to the chasana. So in a wedding, there are 2 stages, which we witness this by every wedding. Good morning. Thank you very much. So at a chuppah, what happens is that you watch the chassan kala go to the chuppah, and the first thing that happens is that the chassan puts the ring on the finger of the kala, and this is called kedushin, which means at this point they are married, and halachically they're married husband and wife, and halachically they should be allowed to live together, and halachically if they have a relation with anyone else during this time, that's considered adultery. But the Chachamim added that there should be another stage. So in the times of the Gemara, actually they waited 12 months after this. And 12 months later, they did the second part of the marriage, which was the chuppah. The chuppah consists of basically 3 things. One is the 2 things. Basically, they do the Sheva Brachas on a cup of wine, and then the Yichud, and then they're considered husband and wife. They're allowed to live together. So the names for this, the 2 names, number 34, Erisin is the first stage, and Nisuin is the second stage. So this is also a metaphor for the 2 stages regarding Matan Torah. What am I referring to? So we mentioned when we spoke about Sfira that there's something very unique about Shavuos, that no other Yontiv has that, and that is the only Yontiv that has no date, and it's not really established by a date, which means Rosh Hashanah is the day, the first day of the month of Tishrei. Pesach is the 15th day of Nisan. Sukkot is the 15th day of Tishrei. Purim is the 14th day of Adar. And Chanukah is the 25th day of Kislev. Shavuos is not established by a day. In fact, in the times when they used to When they used to decide the new month based on when they saw the new moon, it didn't always come out on the same day of the month. Sometimes Shavuos came out on the 6th day of Sivan, sometimes on the 5th day of Sivan, and it was different from one year to the next. And the reason for that is because there's no date to it. What it says in the Torah is that you'll count 50 days, and on the 50th day will be Shavuos. The truth is, this halacha even applies today. Even though we have a fixed calendar, and now it's always the 6th, but it applies if you're going to travel and pass the date line. So, for example, you live in America and you're going to Australia for Shavuos. What happens? You miss a day. So you are, let's say you're going to travel on Tuesday, and you come to Australia, it's going to be Thursday. What happened to Wednesday? You didn't have a Wednesday. Because while you're traveling, you never had a change of day. And when you got there, it's already Thursday. So therefore, you can't count the Omer until you get to Australia. And therefore, your counting is you're one day behind everybody else. They're a day ahead of me. So my 50th day is actually going to be one day after them. So there are different opinions of halacha, but the opinion that most people follow is that I have to keep Shavuos on a different day than the rest of the community. And the same as the reverse. People that come from Australia or China, these places to America, is the reverse. You have the same day twice on the way that you travel. I had that once. You have not this time of the year, but you have the same day twice. I came from Australia to America. So I leave Melbourne and it was Sunday. And then it's nighttime. And then next place I arrived was a place called Fiji Islands. It's Sunday again. They had to put on tefillin, daven all over again. And it was that day of the week was the double. So we got back what we lost on the way to Australia. When we lost the day, then we get it back when you go back. So this person has to celebrate Shavuos a day before everybody else. And not only that, for men, it makes another difference. A man is supposed to put on tefillin, but on Shavuos you're exempt from tefillin. So this man is going to be putting on tefillin on Shavuos, because for him it's a regular day. The only thing is that the halach is you don't do anything publicly that's violating Yontif, because everybody else is keeping Yontif. But for me personally, why is this? Because Shavuos is established by the 50th day, not by the day of the month, even today. What we see from this is that in a sense, Shavuos is not a Yontif in itself. Shavuos is the culmination of Pesach. So that's what it means, that Pesach and Shavuos are really one Yontif. The only difference is Pesach is the opening, the beginning of something, and Shavuos is the completion of something. So the Medrash says, this is a Medrash that says that Pesach is like the Erusin, is like the first stage of marriage, when Hashem gave us the ring, and Shavuos is Nisun, that's when the marriage was finalized. If you think of it in terms of Pesach and Shavuos, you understand that the difference is that Pesach was basically going away from something, going away from Mitzrayim, going away from Egypt, going away from impurity. And Shavuos is going into something, is going into my relationship with Hashem. And to a certain extent, the same thing is even in a marriage, in the Gashmistic way, that when a woman gets married, before she's married, and as long as she's single, basically she could marry anyone else. That means she can marry everyone. So she has not a relationship, but she has an open potential to marry any person that would marry her. The only thing is that once she gets married to this individual, these are the two things that happen. One is now she's no longer connected to anyone else. And in addition to that, now she's totally connected to this person. So years ago, chronologically, it was 2 times. One was Kedushin. So in other words, that was the stage, just like in Mitzrayim. We went away from where we were, from the previous status. I left the previous status, then we have a break in the middle, which is to process it and process my preparation, and then I go into a new status. So the same is with Mitzrayim, we went from a previous status into a new status. But in essence, it's the same. Why do we do it the way we do it today? Because the Gemara says what happened was, I mean, at a certain point, people became spiritually weaker. And this is actually a sort of a danger zone. On one hand, here's the person that you're officially married to, and therefore there's a closeness, like husband and wife. On the other hand, they're not allowed to be together like husband and wife yet. So therefore, it's a big challenge. And as they saw that people were getting weaker spiritually, they made that the Eris and the Sun should both be taking place at the same time. In fact, I think the reason why they read the Ksuba, why do they read the Ksuba by the Chuppah? What does the whole world have to hear? The declaration of how I'm committing myself to my wife. So one of the reasons, I'm sure there's more to it, but one of the reasons that are given is literally to make a break, to do something, to separate. This is one procedure, and now this is another procedure. You do something in the middle. So our in the middle is counting of the Omer. That's our in the middle, processing, and then we go to Nisur. So in fact, this is also something we mentioned when we did the Sfiras Omer. I have it here again, number 35 and 36. That number 35 is a pasuk in Chumash where it talks about a woman and marriage. And number 36 is where it talks about Hashem and the Bnei Yisrael. So we count the Omer, it says in the Chumash, Usfartem lachem sheva shabbos tmimos. In the booklet, you have it on page 53 and 54, where it says you should count 7 days, and that's your preparation for Matan Torah. And in reference to marriage by a woman, if you take a look on page 52, it's almost the identical words, where it says, she will count Sheves Yamas, 7 days to become pure, and then she could be with her husband. So we're also purifying ourselves. And this is what the Zohar says. The Zohar says that the 7 weeks of counting is purifying herself like a woman purifies herself with the 7 days of counting. So based on this is also something very beautiful. When we use the metaphor of marriage, of course, there's a lot of things that are based on that. But I want to point out one thing. If you want to look at page 55, page 55 is a page of Gemara. But what I'm pointing to is not the Gemara itself, but on the side there's an arrow there. And this is one of the commentators on the Gemara. And look at his name. His name is Rabbeinu Gershom, Ma'or HaGoyla. Rabbeinu Gershom, the one who brought light to the exile. Who was he? He lived about 1,000 years ago. And he was the greatest sage of that generation. He was the leader of that generation. But the question that's asked is, why is he called Ma'or HaGoyla? The one who brought light to the exile. I mean, after all, there were many tzaddikim, and each one in their own right brought light to the Jewish people through their Torah teaching, through different things that they taught. And therefore, it's hard to understand why would one particular tzaddik be singled out and we refer to him as the one who brought light to the exile. What's the connection? So there's a beautiful explanation given. And the Rebbe said the source of the explanation is, it wasn't clear who the source is, but the content is definitely authentic. And that is as follows. Rabbeinu Gershon is someone that enacted a number of takonos, which means certain things that we follow, because you saw the weakness of the generation, and therefore certain laws have to be enacted. So he's known for those laws. And it's more than one or two. I forgot the exact number, but quite a few. But two of them that are sort of very famous is, one is regarding marriage, that in the Torah, and from a Torah halacha point of view, it's perfectly permissible for a man to marry more than one wife. I'm not talking about Yaakov Avinu, who was before the Torah was given, but we're talking about, according to Torah, a man could marry more than one wife. It's in the Chumash, and that's the way it was. Not that it was very common, but that was permissible according to Torah. Rabbeinu Gershon, he lived 1,000 years ago, and he enacted this takana that from now on, a man should only marry one woman, and it's called Cherem Rabbeinu Gershon, which means he set it up in such a way that whoever violates that would be in excommunication. Excommunication is sort of the harshest thing you can possibly do to a person. He becomes excommunicated from the community in many different ways, which means you don't do any business with him and you don't stand in the 4 cubits near him. He's simply sort of out of the community. So everyone, generally speaking, followed this. And that's one takana that he made. And the other takana was that halachically, if a man gives a wife a get, a divorce, and she really doesn't want to take it, and it's sort of forced and given to her, it's valid. So he enacted another halacha, that if a man gives a wife a get and she doesn't want it, it's not valid until she accepts it willingly. And otherwise it's not valid. Okay. So the question is, that's okay, it's very important things, and obviously it was needed, but there are so many other important things that so many other great rabbis and great sages enacted, different things that they did in order to prevent things and to strengthen things. So why dafka these two things is the reason why he was given this title. So it's explained that this explanation that I'm talking about explains in the following way. First of all, it's based on the fact that the Gemara says Hashem follows the Torah. A strange thing to say. What does it mean he follows the Torah? It means that Hashem observes the Torah just like we do, but of course in a different way completely. It's also all about things that he does in a spiritual way, but everything that he does in a spiritual way, it corresponds to the mitzvahs that we have. So it means that whatever matzah is in our realm, there's something spiritually that Hashem does, which corresponds to matzah. And there's something spiritually that corresponds to shofar. And something spiritually that corresponds to different mitzvahs. And so on. And in fact, it goes both ways. Hashem gave us the mitzvahs to observe the mitzvahs that he does. Like it says in the Medrash that normally a king would give different rules and different instructions and directives to the subjects of his country. And very often, he doesn't really care whether it's easy for them or hard for them, or they could do it or they can't do it. He just gives his rules. But Hashem, in fact, there are certain times where he tells them to do things and he himself doesn't even follow that. But Hashem, whatever he tells us to do, he does. It's based on a pasuk in Tehillim, which we actually say in davening. Which chapter is it? It's the pasuk. Actually, that chapter ends with these words: Magid dvarav liYaakov, chukav mishpatav Yisrael. Hashem tells us his words and his statutes and his things that he observes. That's what he tells us to do. But it also works in another way that Hashem says, like we learned before, Torah is not in heaven; it's down here. Everything goes by the ruling of what we do down here on earth. So the Gemara says that when the Malachim say to Hashem, when is the new month? So Hashem says, related to this week, where this Shabbos, we're going to be blessing the new month. Hashem says, come, let's go down to the earthly Bezdin and see what they rule. When they rule the new month, that's when it'll be the new month up here as well. So basically, the ruling of the Bezdin down here, that's what sets things up there. And Hashem follows that in the way that Hashem does it, which is totally in a spiritual way. So being that Hashem and the Yidden are husband and wife, and the reason why we're in Golus is because we weren't loyal. Worshipping idols and doing other things, we weren't loyal to Hashem. We violated that relationship, and that's why Hashem sent us to Golus. So there's a fear that Chas v'Shalom Hashem could decide to divorce us. We're not following, we're not loyal, we're not dedicated. It's like a husband and wife. If the wife is sort of rebelling against him, then that's a basis for divorce. So what did he do? He enacted a halacha that a man cannot divorce his wife against her will. As long as she doesn't want to be divorced, then it's not valid. So by enacting that halacha, it's binding to Hashem as well, that He can divorce us unless we will. But no Jew wants to be divorced, so therefore it can never happen. And it's interesting, this idea that no Jew wants to be divorced is based on Chassidus, that even though a person outwardly might say, I want no part of it, I'm not interested in Torah, I'm not interested in mitzvahs, I'm not interested in Yiddishkeit, as unfortunately there are people who say that. So the truth is, according to Torah, that whatever they're saying, whatever they're thinking, is not their real essence. That's on the outside. But this is one of the, really an amazing thing, that not only is this something in Chassidus or Kabbalah, it's actually brought down in Halacha. And the places brought down halachas in the Rambam. So in the booklet, I put it here so you can see it, 56 and 57. 56 is the Hebrew, not 56. If you turn the page, you have it in English. And the Rambam says the following. Let's read it. A man that the law requires to be compelled to divorce his wife. Let's say halachically, he has to divorce his wife. For example, she committed adultery, they're not allowed to be married to each other anymore. Of course, if she did it willingly and knowingly and so on. What if the man doesn't want to? If he doesn't want to, divorce is not valid. So it said the court should have him beaten, or let's say a wife who feels that the husband is abusing her, she doesn't want to be living with him anymore. So he's beaten until he consents, at which time they should have a get written, and that get is acceptable. And this applies to all times and all places. So basically, he has to say the words that I want to do it. And once he says, I want to do it, halachically, it's considered okay. So when you read something like that, you think to yourself, come on, he doesn't really want to do it. If you stop forcing him, he will continue what he wants to do. He's only doing it because we're hurting him. So look at the next page. I guess it's 56b here. And let's read from the paragraph at the beginning of the page. Why is this get not void? He's being compelled, either by a Jew or by a Gentile, to divorce against his will. And a get must be given voluntarily, and here he's doing it against his will. Why is this get valid? So the answer is, because the concept of being compelled against one's will applies only when speaking about a person who is being compelled and forced to do something that Torah does not obligate him to do. For example, a person was beaten until he consented to sell something, to give a present. It's not valid because he was forced. If, however, a person's evil inclination presses him to negate the observance of a mitzvah or to commit a transgression, and he was beaten until he performs the act he was obligated to perform, or he disassociate himself from a forbidden action, is not considered forced against his will. On the contrary, it is he himself who is forcing his own conduct to become debased. In other words, the Hebrew is a little bit more clear. The Rambam says the Yetzer Hara is forcing him not to do what he really wants. So when the person says, I want to do it, the way the Torah looks at it is that this is his true will, and halachically it's considered valid because he really wants it. I just want to conclude the thought. So therefore, when he enacted this halacha, which is binding to Hashem, so there's no way that Hashem could, again, metaphorically divorce us because no Jew wants to be divorced, and he can't give a divorce against someone's will, so it could never happen. So he's stuck with us. What?
Why is it that we can beat the man but not the woman? Like, what makes the woman's will more, like, less arguable as opposed to the man's will?
Why should we beat the woman?
Why not?
He's the one that has to do it. He doesn't want to do it.
But what if it's the opposite? Does it ever come from the man? You just said if a woman
You're asking if a woman is supposed to take it and she refuses to accept.
Yeah. Okay. Like, why do we do it if the woman doesn't accept the get, then we don't?
Beat the woman. I wouldn't expect the question to come from a woman. I don't know. I don't. It doesn't only apply to get; it applies to other halachas. If something that a person must do, and the only way that it's valid is if he does it willingly. So if he's forced to do it, it's considered willingly. I mean, I'm not going into the man and woman issue right now. I want to go into the issue of what's willing and what's not willing. If it's considered, if someone does something by force, if he says the words, okay, I agree, I give consent to do this, why would the Torah give it any validity if we know that it's only because it's being forced? So the answer is, I mean, here's one of the places we see something incredible, that a concept which is really a concept in Chassidus is actually found in Halacha, in the Rambam. This concept, I don't think it's found anywhere else so clearly, that a person, in essence, your true desire is to be connected to Hashem, and if a person says otherwise, that's not the real you. And therefore, halachically, if you verbalize the words, I want to, I give consent, we consider that as valid. The only problem is that Hashem might say, okay, I can't get rid of you guys. I'll just marry another woman. In other words, I'll take another nation and I'll make that nation my favorite nation. And I'll give that nation laws and mitzvahs to do and to be connected to them. So he enacted another halacha. What's the other halacha? That a man can marry two women. So once he did that, now Hashem is also binding to that halacha. He can't marry two women, which means that it's only Yidden and no one else.
Spartan didn't pick up that gezerah.
What?
Spartan didn't pick up that gezerah.
I'm going to speak about that in a second. First of all, what does it mean Hashem is binding? And if he wouldn't have done that, then Chas v'Shalom Hashem would just cut us off. In fact, one of the reasons why Shavuos is called Shavuos, again, Shavuos, why is it called Shavuos? What's the simple reason why it's called Shavuos? Weeks. Because we count 7 weeks until it comes to this day. But another reason, remember I told you there's a Gemara called Shavuos, but it's not about the holiday, it's about an oath. So one of the reasons that are given for the name Shavuos is because the Jewish people, by Matan Torah and Hashem, both took an oath. Hashem took an oath that you will be my nation forever, and the Yidden took an oath that we're connecting ourselves to you forever, like an oath in a marriage. Same idea. But this is for an oath for eternity. So Hashem already took an oath that we're going to be his nation forever. Why did he have to do and act this halacha? So the answer is, of course, that was something which was already done by Matan Torah, but by enacting this halacha, he made that unconditional love that Hashem has for us should be more revealed. We should be more effective. We should see it more openly in the world. So you're asking a question, what about Sfardim? Which is true that he was an Ashkenazic person. He lived in Germany. And the Sephardic Jews did not accept a lot of his rulings. And therefore, in Sephardic communities, where the country allows it, there's certain countries where the men have more than one wife. In fact, when Jews were left Yemen and went to Israel, there were men that came with more than one wife. And because they were already married and all that, so Israel allowed it, even though it's not allowed according to the country. So if this is the case, what happens to Sephardic Jews? So the Rebbe gave a beautiful explanation. And the Rebbe explained that the reason why this needed to be done, why did he do it 1,000 years ago? Why didn't they do it earlier? So it's like we explained in many other classes, that every generation post-destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the darkness in the world in some ways gets darker. Because the Beis HaMikdash is our source of light. That's what brings godliness to be revealed in the world. And every generation after the destruction of Beis HaMikdash, it gets darker. The first generation, there's still some light lingering from the Beis HaMikdash. The second generation, a little bit less. And the third generation, a little bit less. So he lived about 1,000 years after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. So by that time, he saw that there's such a darkness in the world, and such a weakness in the world, that therefore it was necessary to make this enactment. The Rebbe explained that the gullus in Sephardic communities was never as severe as the gullus in Ashkenazic communities. First of all, the Gashmias, that the persecution and that we read about, and the expulsions and the persecutions and the pogroms and all that were primarily in Europe and these countries, not in the Sephardic countries. In fact, throughout all the generations, there was a certain period of time, but generally speaking, the Jews lived peacefully in these countries where the Sephardim lived. So Begashmias, the Golus wasn't as severe, and also Beruchnias. The difference between the Muslims and the Christians is what the Muslims believe, according to halacha, for a non-Jew is not considered avodah zarah, because they believe in one God, and they believe in, they worship Him whichever way, whatever they do, but they believe in Him as a prophet. The Christians actually believe in Him as a God. I remember when the Rebbe spoke about it once, he was smiling, he said, today, they're not so frum like Bamol. So therefore, today, they also don't believe in Him as a God. So they really believe in one God. But generally, in essence, I mean, there's a machlekes amongst Torah, halachic authorities, whether Christianity is pure avodah zarah or not. But generally speaking, most opinions hold that it's avodah zarah. What they believe is avodah zarah. So therefore, in the spiritual sense, we were in a much more severe gullus when we were amongst the Christians than the gullus that was there amongst the Muslims, Baruchnis. Because here we're amongst people that are not worshiping idols, and here we're amongst people that are worshiping idols. So therefore, if the whole purpose of this enactment was because the gullus is so severe, as it got worse, we needed to do something additional to make sure that that unconditional love of Hashem should be revealed in the Gullus, in the Sephardic communities. It wasn't as necessary as in the Ashkenazic communities, and that's why the halacha wasn't enacted.
What does that mean for the mashal you're drawing of Hashem when we having one nation?
What does it mean?
When you're trying to like draw this mashal of Hashem, like only
right.
being married to us. So like, how does it?
That means in Sephardic communities, because the descent wasn't so severe, it wasn't necessary to make this no halacha. Means in Hashem, we learned the other day, Elu ve'elu divrei l'kilum chayim, that both opinions of halacha are true. This is true. In other words, when Ashkenazim have one halacha and Sephardim have another halacha, it's not that one of them is doing it right and one is doing it wrong. That would mean, okay, we just had Pesach. There's certain foods that Sephardic Jews eat, and the Ashkenazic Jews is considered chametz. We don't eat. So is one of them doing the right and one wrong? The answer is no. For them, this is right because that's what their halachic authorities say, and for them, this is right. How could it both be true? I guess it's like begashmias. There's certain foods that people are allergic to. For one person, wow, this is my most delicious dish, and for another person, if they eat that food, God forbid, they become sick. So spiritually is also such a thing. So if Ashgacha Pratis, this person was born in a Sephardic community and is under the halachic authority of a Sephardic Rav, that means that his neshama is connected to that, and for him it's okay to do this, and for him it's okay to do that. I think it's with the Tzemach Tzedek. There's a story with the Tzemach Tzedek that there was a chassid that the doctors found that there was some sort of a puncture in his lungs. I'm not sure the detail, where, what, and when, but I think it was something with the lungs. And the doctor said to him that there's no way that he can live. Probably he doesn't have more than a year to live. So he asked the Tzemach Tzedek for a bracha. So Tzemach Tzedek told him he should move to Israel. Moved to Israel, and he lived some 20-something more years. So Tzemach Tzedek explained, in Israel, at least at that time, where there was a very small community, who lived in Israel? The Beis Yosef, which is the Rabbi Yosef Karo, who was the ultimate halachic authority for Sephardic Jews. He was considered the authority in Israel, and that's what people followed there. In Europe, the ultimate halachic authority was the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserlish, who was a halachic authority there. They have actually a dispute about this kind of a condition. It's regarding an animal, if it's treif or not. If an animal has a condition that it can't live for more than 12 months, then it's considered treif, even if you shecht it. But if it cannot survive for more than 12 months, it's considered not kosher. So therefore, there's a machlekes. One of them says that with this kind of condition, it could live, and one says it can't. So he sent him off to Israel. He'd be under the authority of Rabbi Yosef Karo, and over there he could live longer, because that's the halacha. Of course, the Tzemach Tzedek must have had a little bit of an input into this also, but that was the way it was done. So therefore, they're both true. And in the Sephardic communities, they didn't need this additional sort of thing to be added. And in the Ashkenazic world, it was necessary. Just to keep the continuation going, I'm going to go back to the other ones. I want to go to another subject, which is 43 and 44. So Matan Torah, there were a lot of miracles that happened when the Torah was given. And one of them is when it says, which means, Rashi explains this in the Chumash, in Parshas Yisro, and that is that when Hashem gave the Torah, this is the way it happened. First, Hashem said the entire Torah in one breath. It was a miracle. It doesn't mean that he said it very fast. Like when we read the 10 sons of Haman by the Megillah, we say it fast, and we don't breathe in the middle. No, it means to say it was pronounced like a person would pronounce one word, and yet it was the whole Aseret Adibros. It's basically a kind of a miracle, like taking something which is 20 feet and fitting it into a spot which is 20 inches. And how does that happen? So it's taking Aseret Adibros, which is so many words, but pronouncing it as if it was one single word. That's how Hashem gave the Torah initially. Then he repeated it, and to repeat each one of the 10 commandments separately. Said the first one, said the second one, and then the Yidden said to Moshe Rabbeinu, this is so overwhelming, we can't handle it. So then the next 8, Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who said them out loud. So that's the meaning of these words. Anochi v'lo the first 2 commandments, which is I am God, your God, that took you out of Mitzrayim. And the second one, which says, Lo yilecha mepi agvura shamanu. Lo yilecha means you shouldn't have any idols. These 2 we heard from Hashem himself. The other 8 we heard from Hashem through Moshe's mouth. As if Moshe was the channel through which Hashem spoke. Hashem spoke out of his mouth. But the first 2 we heard directly from Hashem. So the question is, why did Hashem do that? Being that the whole idea of Matan Torah was that we should get this direct sort of teaching from Hashem himself, why didn't Hashem say all 10? Why only 2? So initially the answer is that even though it's only 2, but these 2 include in them all the commandments. How is that? So number 44 is Ava, love for Hashem, is the source of all the 248 positive commandments. And fear of Hashem is the source for all the 365 negative commandments. This is found in Tanya. So let's look that up and let's look inside. It'll be a little bit easier. Just a few lines here. It's chapter 20 in Tanya. What? Where's chapter 20?
No.
Page 49. Page 49. If you look at the bottom of the page in the Hebrew, I mean it's Hebrew English, but the Hebrew on the bottom of the page reads Vihine Muda Zois. That's how chapter 20 begins. Ki mitzvahs v'azharas avodah zarah, that the mitzvah of believing in Hashem and not worshiping idols, these are the 2 first dibros, the first 2 commandments. Anochi v'lo yilecha, hem klolos kol haTorah. This includes the entire Torah. And the way it's included is that the first commandment, I am God, your God, which is a positive commandment, includes all the positive commandments. The second commandment, which is don't worship idols, includes all the negative. Don't do all the negative things. And the simple reason for this is what it says in Tanya, also in the beginning of Tanya, that love for Hashem is the source of all the positive commandments. What's the emotion that drives me to do mitzvahs? Is the love for Hashem. Just like Begashmias, when you have love for a person, then it drives me to do something to make the connection with that person in one way or another. And because I love that person, therefore I will not do something that will make me lose this relationship. So the love is what makes me go forward, and the fear of losing that relationship will stop me and prevent me from doing anything that could sever the relationship. So therefore, all the mitzvahs are included in love for Hashem, and that's the first commandment. You should you should only worship Hashem who took you out of Egypt. And the second commandment is don't worship idols, meaning don't do anything that is going to sever your relationship with Hashem. So in a sense, all the mitzvahs are included in that. But what we need to explain, which will be Mirz Hashem on Monday, is according to this, the fact that the first two include all the mitzvahs, it doesn't mean that Avodah Zarah or not Avodah Zarah is really everything. It just means that this is a positive commandment. Anything you do against Hashem's will is sort of violating that relationship. True, but there's no real connection between eating kosher and believing in Hashem. Like in essence, the nature of keeping kosher or the nature of putting up a mezuzah in itself has nothing to do with worshiping idols or not. It's just being that Hashem said to do it, we have to follow. But we'll explain, according to Tanya, how no, the actual mitzvah itself, the content of the mitzvah, and the real meaning of the mitzvah, the real theme of the mitzvah is identical to Avodah Zarah, all the mitzvahs, positive and all the negative mitzvahs. To be continued. A good Shabbos, everybody. Shabbos and Borchim. And this is the month of Matan Torah.
Consider a lot of change in marriage with marriage. So, and you said that it's like Hashem is my policy. So what does it mean for group marriage?
No, yeah. Oh, you mean by Sephardim Jews? What does that mean?
No, us.
By us? No, it means to say that Chas v'Shalom Hashem will never exchange us for another nation and say, okay, I'm going to take another nation that is being that we're not loyal to him, being not being a loyal wife. So I'll take another wife. Meaning, say, I'll take another nation and I'll give them also commandments and mitzvahs.